Okay, so in the previous video we did passing pointers to functions, and that maybe make sense, but you may say, well, why are we going to actually use that? That may seem a little silly. And what happens is you start to use them a lot more once we start getting into structures, because structures get more into the real world type of programming. You tend to use structures a lot in actual programs. You don't really pass around integers and floats to functions. I mean, you do a little bit, but it tends to be a lot more efficient and readable when you actually pass around structs. So let's create a struct and let's pretend we have a car. And if any of this is not familiar, review the video on structs. And then let's say the car has a, let's use the Boolean is started. And then let's also, what else do we want to have in a car? Let's have a string color. And let's figure out how to use an integer or a float. Let's use a float for something. Let's say miles per gallon, so that's a good one. And then let's have an integer current speed. And then let's take our function and let's make sure that that we're all good with the syntax and everything's happy. Okay, so I don't see any red squiggly lines or anything, so we're good. So our struct is created successfully. So let's get rid of some of this code here we have from before. And let's take this function and let's have it do something more useful. Let's have it start car. And this is something we sort of touched on earlier, and I kind of waved my hands a little bit and I said, trust me. What we were actually doing in our previous example when we were starting a car, we were starting a copy of the car. We weren't starting the original car. So in this case, what we want to do is we wanted to take an struct car, and then let's say car instance. And so right now we've got a copy of the car. And so if we were to do something like car instance dot is started, if we want to set that to true, well, we're just starting a copy of that car. And so let's go through real quick here. Say my car, and then we will say my car dot is started equals false. And then so let's do a little see out here to make sure we're on the up and up and everything's good and I'm not telling you any lies here. So we'll say and then we will call our function, and then we'll pass it my car, and then we'll see what the value is afterwards. And so and I should note this, Booleans are false is 0 and true is 1, and so you can kind of see the internal representation of that is shown here, but this is saying false, and after we call our function, our car is not started still. So what happened is we started a copy of the car. So what if we want to start the original car? So what we would have to do is now we take a pointer, and then so we no longer say and I'll explain this in a moment as well, what I'm doing here. We have to put parentheses because of a specific reason. So it's sort of similar. to our integer example. But now if we were to run this, so let me explain the modifications I made. I said now we're taking a pointer to a struct instead, and then we are changing that memory address, and then I had to modify here to pass the address of the car instead of just the car. And then now we can see our car is actually started. So what happened here is this is a sort of an order of operations thing. So if I didn't have these parentheses around here, our program either wouldn't compile or would do something crazy. Let's see which it is. Okay, so it didn't even compile. What happens is when you do the order of operations, like in math, you've got the addition, the subtraction, and the multiplication. So the multiplication is done before the addition, but if you put parentheses around the addition, you can say I want to do the addition first. Well, what happened here is this little dot, it tried to execute the dot first. It tried to parse it and say my car dot is started, and then it did this star. Well, we actually want to do this in a different order. We want to say do this first, jump to the memory address of the car and dereference that, and then do is started. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can just kind of commit this to memory, and as you practice it, it'll get a little more fluent. And then say we want to do another one here. Let's say we want to change the car's color. And so now we do the same thing. We do a parenthesis and we say car instance, and then we want our color to now be blue. And let's make sure this still compiles, that we haven't broken anything. Okay, and then so now we would do this basically the same thing, and just to give you another example, we would call change color, and then we would pass the address of my car, not the original. And if you, well, we'll show that this still compiles. And if you were to try to pass it without this, it would say, okay, I'm getting a copy of the car. I'm not getting an address to the car. That's not what my function said, and it won't compile. You get all kinds of errors. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Please email if that doesn't, and I'll do a third video. But maybe some of you maybe want to use this for your assignment. And so say, for example, the robot. You want to have a function that says go forward. And so what you'd do is you'd create a robot struct, and you'd make a function called go forward, and you'd call go forward, and it would go forward, say, 10 feet and stop, or however you want to make your function. And I wanted to make sure there was no confusion that if you tried to call that function, you're actually calling it on a copy, not the original, and so you're frustrated and want to know what's happening. This programming class is a very good programming class, and hopefully it teaches you some skills about real-world programming as opposed to COP 2000, which kind of just introduces a lot of things. This course, hopefully you get a lot more practice getting some code under your fingers and committing this to your long-term memory, so it's not just something you study for the test and move forward. So I want to, even if we don't necessarily use this for data structures, I want you to know how this works, because it's a very extensively used and common thing in real-world programming. So please email me any questions. If you have a question, typically other students will as well. So you can email me anonymously if you'd prefer, just from your own personal account. Email account, and I'll do a video still. It doesn't have to be for your IRC account if you're too embarrassed to bring up a topic or say that you don't understand something. So, but please let me know if there's, especially being an online class, I don't see reactions on faces. I don't know how well you guys are getting this, and I don't want to get to the first assignment and everyone's lost and then have to review at that point. I'd rather make any new videos right now before the first assignment is due.